All right. Pornography is a hot topic on X lately and on social media. And much like many other hot button issues, secular feminists, as well as traditional conservative women alike, are using the issue to degrade and try to control male behavior. They're cherry picking the research in order to support typical shaming tactics against men. That said, the data is clear that pornography can be harmful to men. And so, where is the truth about this, and where does the research actually lie? So, that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, we're going to examine pornography through a scientific and relational lens, what the research actually says, and what it consistently fails to address. And we're also going to do that by addressing a tweet and a little bit later from a traditional conservative commentator who has been facing off against, well, just pearly things for one, and other people on the internet on this pornography issue. So I'm not getting into her internet drama, but we're going to look at her tweet and break down some of the things that are being said about porn and what is true and what isn't true. All right. We know from neuroscience that high frequency of pornography exposure activates the same reward pathways involved in behavioral addictions. Studies from Cambridge, Max Planck, and multiple peer reviewed journals show changes in dopamine signaling, reward sensitivity, and changes in sexual arousal pattern from excessive and frequent porn use. We also know from clinical data that pornography can contribute to sexual dysfunction, especially in younger men. We'll address the age issue with pornography because I think that's the most important element that's getting left out here. But we know that it shapes arousal towards high novelty digital stimulus rather than real life sexual encounters, and that's why men who consume excessive pornography tend to be bad at sex. All right. That tends to be what it is. All right. Their sexual performance isn't very good because of their reframing and reshaping their brain towards high novelty digital stimulus. All right. But here's the second half of the picture that, isn't really being addressed. And that's where this conversation has been incomplete, which is pornography use rarely occurs in a vacuum. All right. Clinical research on marriage and intimacy shows that porn usage often emerges when there is a significant sexual disconnection, and when there's chronic rejection, and when there's a mismatch in desire within the relationship. All right. So this pornography use, especially among married men, it's not just all men's fault, and it exists in this vacuum. Okay. In many marriages, men report turning to pornography, not out of deviance or out of addiction, but just out of deprivation after months or years of low sexual engagement from their wives. And interestingly, the same literature that documents this dynamic also notes that pornography is often used as a point of leverage for criticism against the man rather than an opportunity to examine the underlying relational issues. So the research is clear on two levels. One is, yeah, pornography is not good for guys. All right. It's not good for your sexual performance. Okay. It can be harmful to men. I advocate having real sexual relationships rather than a relationship with your screen. That's my personal advocation for you guys. Okay. I think you're going to be better off because it's not good for you neurologically, sexually, or relationally. But at the same time, we got to notice in we have to say something about the shame narrative around pornography that is often used as a mechanism for control in marriages and in relationships. And it's used as a mechanism of control where intimacy is already broken down. And that's often due to the woman withholding sex from her husband. So we have to recognize that other thing. Okay. And so we're going to look at all this stuff. All right. From a neurobiological, psychological, and relational factors, and the power dynamics, which is rarely mentioned between men and women, so that men can understand how not only pornography affects them, but also why it's showing up in the first place. All right. And so let's go down the rabbit hole. If you guys got any thing to say, throw it in the chat. I always try to respond to those. Those little super chats or stickers help the algorithm, but any participation from you will help the algorithm. I am algorithmically suppressed all the time as a channel that advocates for healthy relationships and a positive masculine identity. Sometimes my messages and narratives don't fit the political values of companies like YouTube and in places like California. So I get, algorithmically suppressed. I'm working to try to work within the rules to not let that happen, but you guys can help me with subscribing to the channel, liking, any comments in the comment section or in the chats. Those things help, and any of those little super chats help too. So appreciate that. I'm actually going to move into a little advertisement, if you guys don't mind. It's only 2 minutes. Hopefully you like it. It seems like it'll be cool. So I don't know. Let's see. Here's a little ad here, and then we'll get on with the topic. Psychopaths are evil, but they are successful. And not because they're evil. They're successful because they're effective. The average man is drowning in overthinking, fear, people pleasing, and hesitation, while the most ruthless personalities walk through life winning, while you are struggling and you are losing. But here's the truth: you don't need to be a psychopath to win. You just need to learn the traits that they mastered and use them without being immoral or having poor ethics. Focus so sharp that it cuts through distraction. Charm that bends social dynamics. Resilience that makes you unshakable. Ruthlessness, but with empathy for others. The ability to say no without guilt. Fearlessness in the moments that matter. Mindfulness that kills anxiety, and action taking that separates leaders from followers. This isn't about becoming a terrible person. It's about becoming powerful. Someone who leads, someone women trust and desire, someone who commands his world instead of just reacting to it. And that's why I created the Psychopath's Playbook, a complete system for the good men, the non-psychopathic men, but for men who want the results without becoming evil, and without wasting years of trying to figure it out alone. This is an inner game course that will allow you to tap into that thing that you have been missing, that thing that's inside of you that will allow you to make more money, seduce women, and succeed. If you're ready to unlock the traits that make the world's most effective men untouchable, click the link and get into the community. When this course drops, you will get your exclusive announcement, and you'll be on the list before it fills up. And together, we'll make you unshakable, undeniable, and unstoppable. This is where your old self ends and your rise begins. I'll see you there. All right. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. So you got to get into my community to have access to this, okay? When I actually launch the course, I don't have the launch date yet, okay? I'll open for enrollment and then I'll close enrollment. We'll run it just like a college semester, okay? And that way I can limit the numbers and put a high number of attention into those who have signed up. It's an inner game course, but you really won't be able to access it without being in my school community. So you want the announcement for when it launches so you can get on the list to be in the course. So when it fills up, you won't get left out. You got to click that link and be in my community. Okay. You should be there anyways. Being in the community is free. Okay. That's not going to cost you anything. And there's a lot of help there away from the censorship and all that stuff. A lot of good conversations that we can be had there. All right. So now let's get into the actual topic. Thank you for your patience there. Let's go into the tweet. Okay. So I'll share the tweet with you guys that started it all. Well, not really. There's been a conversation going on for a while, but this is a little debate that Pearl and someone by the name of Lila Rose had on X until Pearl I don't know who hung up on who, but you know what I mean? Whatever. It didn't go well. It wasn't a very, whatever. The debate didn't go well, but that's
Okay.
fine.
And every man that I know is against porn.
Every man that you know watches porn.
Okay. All right. So here's part of the debate. It's about 2 minutes. Pretty interesting. All right, let's move in. And then I'm going to play it without my commentary, and then we'll go through the tweet. And then I'm going to talk about the reason why this is important is because, and this is, again, I'm not going to criticize anybody really, like, personally here. Layla Rose, though, is, I don't disagree with all of her positions, just to be clear on Layla Rose. It's just that she's repeating a lot of the same things that are used, the shaming tactics against men, whether she is doing it intentionally or not. I don't think it's intentional. I don't think she thinks she's doing that, but that is what is happening. That's the net result. And some of those things are just not very clear or true, and we need to clear that stuff up here on this stream, okay? I doubt she will watch this stream, but if she does, hopefully she takes it as a way to improve her message, not as a criticism or a slam or anything like that. But okay, let's look into this here. Let's hit the play button.
That's not true.
I mean, we could live in like delusion land. Okay.
And every man that I know is against porn.
Every man that you know watches porn.
That's not true.
I mean, we could live in like delusional land, or we could be realistic. Most men have consumed porn at one point in their life.
That's different from saying they are watching porn.
I mean, we could play semantics.
The social data shows that porn doesn't help men. This is the Christian teaching to have chastity. This is something that is possible. This is a law that comes from God himself. Are you Catholic, Pearl? What's your faith? Do you have a faith?
Why not let God say it?
Pearl, do you have a faith?
If I did have a faith, I certainly wouldn't use it to build my brand online.
If you don't want to share, that's fine. But
I would not use it to build my brand online.
But do you have one? Is my question, not whether or not you use your brand for it.
I want to go back to the question.
Are you dodging me, Pearl?
I want to go back to the question.
You can just say you're not comfortable answering.
Do you think it's in your place as a woman? There's men overseas deployed fighting for our country. Do you think it's in your place as a woman to tell them that they should not watch porn? Go ahead.
Again, Pearl, it's not like my opinion. First and foremost, I'm a Catholic. This is the teachings of the Catholic Church. This is not Lila Rose's question.
I'd really just like you to answer the question. Do you think it's in your place as a woman?
Pearl, muting your guests is a very disrespectful thing to do.
Okay, and I'm going to do it again.
I'm not going to be able to have a conversation with you. I don't think you're acting in good faith right now. I'm going to have to end this stream with you if you're going to continue to mute me. Otherwise, I'm happy to continue. So it's up to you, okay?
I'm always waiting for these like feminine women to show me their submission, and they just never can.
So are you going to continue to mute me during our conversation, or is it going to be a good faith conversation?
If you overtalk me, I will unmute you. Yeah.
Okay. I think we're going to have to close out then, because I think you need to let your audience decide who's over talking who.
All right. See ya.
I didn't leave. No, I didn't leave.
Okay. Anyway, so there's a little drama there. But now, okay, it's actually interesting if you guys go watch over on Pearl's channel the beginning part of the debate, because the point that she makes, that Pearl is making, that gets missed. And I don't know if this was cut up. You know, Pearl looks kind of like a dick here, right? Like muting her and stuff like that. But there's a lot of lead up to that. So I'm going to let you guys decide if you decide to go over there and watch the drama of like who's really wrong, who's right. But the point that Pearl makes here is that why is it in her place to try to tell men what to do? And she makes the point that when women feel like they are in this position to tell men what they need to be doing and not doing, you're basically a feminist. It doesn't matter if you have the traditional conservative hat on, and if that's your brand and that's, you know what I mean, what you're doing to get popular. If you think it's in your place to sit here and tell men what they need to be doing and tell men what to do, what not to do, and all this stuff, then you're really not a feminist. Do you know what I mean? And you don't understand or respect a social hierarchy between men and women, where men are the leaders, so to speak, in relationships and in society. And so it's an interesting point. And then Layla in the conversation talks about men and women being equal and all this stuff, which is the exact same rhetoric from the feminist community. And I don't get too caught up in a lot of that stuff. I mean, it's a complex question, but there is a hierarchy, and certainly in a relationship, there's a dominant element and a submissive element, and we're genetically wired for the man to be that dominant element. That's the genetic wiring. I'm not telling people what they need to do or what they should do, but I'm telling people what they need to do to be successful. Stop sharing that for a second. I'm telling people what they need to do to be successful in relationships. I'm sorry, I'm reading this comment. It makes me laugh. Lady drama over porn. Yes, indeed. Happy Thanksgiving to you. So I'm just telling you what you need to do to be successful. And generally speaking, when I say general, 99% of the time, heterosexual relationships, if the man is not leading, the man isn't in charge, and if the woman isn't supporting that role, it won't work out. It's just the way we're designed biologically. You know what I mean? And you try to work against your own biology, things become increasingly difficult for you. And so that's it. I'm not making like my personal opinion. I don't get caught up in who's better, who should be, whatever. I don't care about that. But if you're coming out with this equality, men and women are equal narrative, which Layla does come out with in the discussion, what do you mean by that? I mean, you can say broadly, loved equally by God. If you're making a religious argument, then you better say that, because equality isn't real. All right. It just isn't. You know what I mean? If I'm in a room, guy or girl, some of those people in that room have things that they do better than me, and they have things they've accomplished that are more than me. And some of them I've accomplished more, can do better than them. I mean, there is no real equality. We can strive for fairness and for having a fair way of treating each other and a fair way of respecting each other. But there is a hierarchy system in society as well as in relationships. And if you're coming out with, well, as a woman, I'm equal to a man, and therefore I should be able to, which is funny. They say equal, but then they feel like they need to tell men what they need to be doing, which isn't equal. That's authority. So there's this covert authority that women think they have over men. And it's rampant in the Christian community. It's rampant in the traditional conservative areas of whatever you want to call it, the world, the internet, society. And that's something that needs to be noticed, because it's the root of why we're failing in relationships and why there's this weird gender war that's going on. It's the root of why we're moving into what I believe is the fifth wave of feminism, which is completely outsourcing sexual and emotional needs to technology, and then having a loneliness epidemic. Not just the loneliness epidemic we're noticing for men, but for women too. Women are pretty lonely right now. All right. Not just guys. And so that's the fifth wave. And you have to push against some of these things that are very subtle if you want to change that. And I'm rooting for the traditional conservative people out there to be a part of that change from their end of the world, but they have to get rid of this equality bullshit. They have to get rid of this really equality that doesn't even mean equality. It's equality that means women really have authority over men. I mean, that's what it is. And they have to get off of that, or they're not really doing anything better than what we could say the stereotypical blue-haired feminist is doing, right? And that's what Pearl's argument is. If you kind of can weed through the whatever, the drama, if you can weed through the drama, get to what she's trying to say. Actually, what she's saying makes sense. All right. I'm not going to, maybe the debate could have been run a little bit differently without them and the muting and all that stuff. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's not for me to tell her. See, this is how it works. I'm not going to tell her what she needs to do for her channel unless she's asking for my advice. You see how that works? How respect works? You know what I mean? And she's a woman, you know what I mean? And I'm a man, but it doesn't really matter. That's her channel. That's her business, right? My opinion, I'm not really sure if muting in that whole thing was the best way to run that debate, but I'm not saying it was the worst way either, and I'm not really sure. And so I'm definitely not in a position to tell her what to do with her platforms, just like she's not in the position to tell me what to do, right? That's how respect works. You see what I'm saying? And you have this lack of respect that is now structural and integral in our society right now, where women just think that they have the freedom and can, that they have the green light to tell men what they need to do and how they need to behave. I talk about the behavior of women in both a positive and negative sense, in a general sense, in my channel, but I'm advising men on how to date them, how to have healthy relationships with women, what choices to make, that sort of thing. I'm not really telling women what to do and pointing the fingers. I don't have a whole platform where I point my finger at women and tell them what they need to do. If they're asking for my advice, I'll provide it, but there is a difference between those two things. And sometimes it does seem like people who I agree with in a lot of ways are doing that, right? They're just pointing the finger at men and telling them what they need to do, right? As if they're in the position of authority. And that is the gynocentric social order, where men are constantly appealing to the perceived authority of women. This is where simping comes from. This is what simping's about. Okay, but this is even in the churches, even in these traditional conservative communities and households, it's, the wife makes the rules kind of bullshit. And it's the destruction of the relationship. And for the Christians and for the conservatives, that destruction is happening from the inside out and very covertly. It's almost more destructive, because you have a lot of ego protecting and lying to yourself going on in these communities. People just lying to each other, lying to themselves, right? And letting, I guess you could say, the gynocentric social order run things and run the household rather than the male leader of the house. And sex is used as a tool in a power dynamic in this whole thing. And so men are being controlled with sex. And if they retreat to something like porn or something like that in order to try to gain a sense of control over their own sexuality, while also abiding by the rules to some degree of not cheating on their wives, then they're shamed and controlled for that. So we have to recognize this is going on. I'm not advocating for porn use, and I'm going to go over why that's bad and destructive, but I'm advocating for healthy sexual relationships and good relationships, which is not coming out of both conservatives or secular communities. It's not coming out of anywhere, statistically speaking. All right. We look at the numbers, people aren't doing well. And so we need to start confronting these problems in order to change those things. Right. So anyways, let's read her tweet. Okay. Cause I'm getting off track. So we'll open this up. So she tweets over this with the link. So porn is destroying our society. Here's just some of what the research shows us. And I'm going to pick all this apart in a minute. Pornography rewires the brain, triggering the same reward pathways seen in drug addiction. It lowers sexual and relationship satisfaction, leaving couples less connected and more isolated. A national study of 2,120 married U.S. adults documented in PubMed found that when a spouse begins to use porn, the likelihood of divorce nearly doubles. That's one we're really going to look at. Okay. Porn fuels exploitation, trafficking, and coercion. More than 88% of mainstream porn scenes include physical aggression towards women. It's strongly linked to sexual dysfunction and the rise of ED among young men. And then she concludes, porn is harmful for so many reasons. It destroys intimacy, clouds judgment, and leaves people disconnected from themselves and their loved ones. And most importantly, it separates us from God. Okay. So that is her tweet. And we're going to cover that. All right. So I want you to notice, though, the lack of accountability here, right? A sexual relationship, a sexual relationship is the responsibility of who? Both men and women in the relationship, right? I mean, both men and women have to participate in that sexual union. Okay. So pornography use is a convenient way to shift that accountability, a thing that women in 2025 are experts at doing. It's like the expert level shift of accountability for much of the, many women. Okay. A lot of fucking women. All right. I don't know what to say. I'm trying not to generalize because I know there's a lot of women who do have accountability, right? There's a lot of them. Okay. But the women who have accountability, who are, by the way, going to do much better in life, they're going against the grain of the social narrative. So when I say women have no fucking accountability, what I'm saying is most women who are following the social narrative, okay, there's a couple women right now on my channel who I know have accountability because I can tell just by the way that they post and the way that they comment and their interest. They wouldn't even be interested in listening to me if they had zero accountability, right? So there's plenty. My girlfriend has accountability. She does pretty well in that department. There's lots of women out there who have it, but they have to push against the social narrative for that accountability. Okay. And blaming porn use, which correlates or translates to male behavior, all right, and saying that's the reason for the destruction of the marriage and all that, right? If we're generalizing that badly, which a lot of these types of posts and tweets sound like they are, we're just shifting accountability away from women. And the very, very simple solution to porn addiction, particularly in a long-term relationship or marriage, is start having sex more. Like that is the answer. And it's so funny to me, the mental gymnastics that people on the internet and women will do, and marriage counselors and experts and religious leaders and everybody else will do great feats of gymnastics in their minds to avoid saying, have sex more. Women, bang your husbands as a solution to a lot of problems. They won't say it. They avoid saying it. They avoid that accountability. They avoid the fact that men are turning to porn in marriages, usually because their wives aren't banging them, aren't having sexual intimacy with them, not at the frequency that the guy wants. It's at the frequency that the girl wants and at how she's feeling that day, right? The woman gets to be in charge because if the woman's not in charge, you're a misogynist. Okay, you're an abusive man. You're a terrible man. The woman doesn't get to covertly be in charge by saying, well, we're equal and 50-50, but then she's the one who makes all the decisions as to when sex happens, how it happens, under what conditions, and what we're having for dinner tonight, and what we're going to do this weekend. And it keeps going, right? But it's 50-50. Okay. So as long as we keep fucking doing that, you're all going to fail. That's it. It's a failure. Okay. It's this fight to make men subservient. And what a convenient way to do that than to use and take sexual behavior in relationships, blame it on the men while neglecting the fact that the women are not having sex with their husbands, and then make it all about porn use. Not that porn use is good or healthy, but that's what we're doing, right? It's like if a girl is starting a fight with a guy every single day, like literally starting the fight and being a problem every single day when he comes home from work, and then he starts going to the bar instead of home right away to have peace and quiet for an hour and a half, right? What would happen in that scenario? They'd go to marriage counseling and the wife would bitch up and down how the guy keeps going to the bar and he won't come home and he just would rather spend time at the bar than be at home with his family. And yes, she is right. He would rather be in that bar for an hour, hour and a half rather than be with his family because his wife is intolerable. But we're not going to talk about that in marriage counseling, are we? We're going to, the counselor guaranteed would sit there and go, oh man, let's talk about your problems with going to the bar and what are you trying to avoid? And if he says it's his wife and his behavior, well, maybe that gets addressed if it's a good counselor, but 80% of the time, 70% of the time, maybe it's not. The blame's going to be on the guy for avoiding his family. And then it's going to be, maybe even a direction of, do you have an alcohol problem? Are you an alcoholic? You see, when the woman is being intolerable, and that's why he's doing that. Now, if I'm coaching that guy, I'm not saying and suggesting that you should just keep going to the bar instead of coming home. Like, that's not what I would do as a coach to that guy. What I would do is I would suggest that he goes home and that he confronts the wife with her behavior. And then if she's not behaving in a way that is within the frame of the relationship, now he starts doing something else. And instead of the bar, maybe it's going to the gym. Maybe it's doing something healthier than sitting around a bunch of losers and drinking. That's my suggestion as a coach, is a better coping mechanism. But I'm sure as fuck not going to shame the guy for his initial response or his initial coping mechanism. Okay. Now, this is analogous for those of you who are intelligent and know how analogies work, which most of you guys listen to me. All right, I hope. This is analogous to the porn thing. All right. When a woman is being intolerable and removing her sexual interest as a means to control her husband, which happens very often, and the guy is like, fine, you know what? I'm just going to jerk off, I guess. And I guess I'll watch porn on my phone when I do it. Right. And that's his response to that scenario. I think it's a bit disingenuous to make the whole focus of the conversation about his excessive porn use and his porn addiction and how the man is destroying his family through porn. Now, again, if I'm coaching that guy, I'm not suggesting that he retreats to pornography. I'm suggesting that he confronts the issues with his wife in a certain way, using certain tools and skills that I teach in coaching, right? Certain communication methods and stuff like that. And if she's unresponsive to those methods, then he starts seeking out alternatives. And if she's going to continue being unresponsive, that'll eventually end the relationship, you see, because you can't let people get away with behaviors that don't fit the frame of your relationship. You can't let women get away with terrible behaviors for the rest of, you just can't, or else that's what you're signing up for. That becomes normal. So you have to eventually create those consequences and be willing to leave. And this is the coaching scenario. So I wouldn't suggest that a guy retreats to pornography and let that be a solution. And pornography is damaging to him, okay, and to men in general. So those things are correct. But we're being a bit disingenuous, aren't we? If that's what we're focusing on, we're ignoring the rest of the problem, which is men have to be subservient to women or else they're abusers, right? Like that whole thing. Men have to, toe the line, can't have any standards for themselves or they're terrible, right? And that these women can just really be in complete control and in charge of the sexual aspect of the relationship and use it as a means to control the man. Like, sorry, like we can't have a discussion about porn on the one hand without talking about the other thing. All right. Or we're being disingenuous. That's my problem with tweets like hers. And her and I might agree on the porn thing actually quite a bit, but I would like to see where's the rest. Okay. Where's the part about women being better wives? Like, I don't know, maybe she does do a lot of this, but I tend to only see from conservative women on Twitter, the criticism of things in society that boils down to men, right? I tend to not see criticism on women and women behaving better, right? I don't see, that's where it's just like I criticize you guys, right? Like I do it all the time. I'm kind of a dickhead, okay? But I criticize you guys all the time to get you guys to do better, all right? Because I coach men mostly. Do a few couples and a few women do come to me, but I mostly coach men. And I'm trying to hold you guys accountable. So I'm talking about shit that guys do that's not good, right? I talk about shit that women do that not good, but it's not even an attempt to change the women, because I don't have very many women that watch my stuff who are asking for that advice. It's to highlight the problems so guys can avoid those problems or learn how to cope or deal with those problems. That's why I talk about it. Where in conservative, trad wife Twitter and trad wife platforms, I mean, that little tweet of hers got 1 million people to look at it. I'm lucky to get 1,000 people or a couple thousand to look at mine. If I get 100,000 people to look at one of the things I write, which is usually better than the things that they write because they don't have a vagina, all right, I'm lucky to get 50,000, 100,000 looks after a week. These women will get 1 million people to look at them. Why are they looking at them? Because we're in a gynocentric social order, and because most guys are simps. They can't listen to a man. They need mommy to tell them and a cute lady to tell them. That's the reality of it. So they run to fucking women to learn how to behave, right? And then these women are just telling them, here's what you need to do. Here's the behavior. Guys, men need to do this. Men need to do that, right? There's a porn problem and men are destroying their marriages with porn, right? No discussion about being a better wife. None. Right. And so that's my issue with it. It's not like if I was ever on a platform, she would never get on a platform with me. And that's okay. She's invited. If she ever wanted to have a discussion, she's welcome. And I'm going to probably treat her more nicely than Pearl did. Not that I'm saying Pearl did anything necessarily wrong or not, whatever. Like, I understand why Pearl's frustrated with these people. Because I get it. I share the same frustrations where it's like they don't even see what they're doing. You know what I mean? They don't even see that they're not being the example of submissive, feminine women at all. They're not, and their platforms seem to be dedicated. Again, I've not gone through hers with a fine tooth comb, so maybe she's more balanced. I really don't know. So I'm not trying to, like I said, I'm not trying to criticize her because I don't know. Only know of her from this little thing that just happened, right? But I tend to only see, and it could be an algorithm thing, but I tend to only see these women mostly criticizing male behavior. I rarely see, I mean, if I see it, I'm sharing it and I'm giving it a big fat thumbs up, like, hey, this is cool, but I rarely see these women criticizing the behavior of women. And there's a lot of bad behavior in women today. There's a lot of women out there that are doing things they shouldn't be doing. There's a lot of women out there that have behaviors that are destroying their abilities to be happy in life, to reach goals, to have healthy relationships, to have healthy families. I mean, there's so much bad behavior there. And I'm only seeing, like, I don't see that criticism coming from the very people who should be criticizing them, which is the trad wives. The trad wives should be saying, hey, ladies, let's do this. I don't see as much of that. You know what I mean? Not really. I see a lot of like, I'm a good wife. I'm a good person. Look at all the things I do that makes me awesome because I'm so good. I see that sort of narcissistic, egotistical type posting from the trad wife world a lot. And I guess we could argue they're trying to provide an example in that way. I don't know. It seems to me, though, that they're really more or less trying to compete in the sexual marketplace by saying they're a better quality of woman than the other women out there. That's what it seems like to me. Like, when I'm trying to help men out, I'm talking about behavior that men need to change. I'm not saying, look at me, I'm this cool dude who does this cool shit and I'm a man and I'm masculine and I got a hot woman and I do this and I drive this vehicle. Look at me, look how cool I am. You guys are losers. That's not really my narrative. Now, I know there's some men's coach that kind of take that angle. I don't really agree. That's not really my angle. So me being narcissistic on the internet, I can now turn around. If I were doing that, which I don't do, I can't argue now that that's what I need to do to help wake men up and change them. That sounds a little crazy. So it works that way with the trad wives. These trad wives, I see a lot of narcissism. I see a lot of posts of, look at the cool things I'm doing with my family. And some of that's just sharing stuff, which is okay. But I mean, it has to do with scale, right? So there's a high scale of, look at me being a good wife, right? Look at me being this great person. And then there's a huge cohort, like I said, millions of men millions will heart and like, and you're such a good woman, because they just want to live out the fantasy through women. There's just absolute simps. That's what we have now, right? So it's just simping. Oh, you're such a great wife, or whatever. So that's what it is. Everyone's LARPing, and then when they actually make social commentary, it's, men are destroying their relationships with porn. That's the social commentary. It's never, ladies, when was the last time you gave your husband a blowjob? Like, that's not the conversation. You know what I mean? If that's too graphic, okay, do it in your own Christian way. Are you subservient to your man? Do you serve him sexually? Do you take care of your man's sexual needs at his whim and at his desire? Why aren't they saying that? You see what I'm saying? If they said both, I would be like, okay, cool. I'd be recommending their platforms. I'd be like, this chick is really based. She's talking about how women need to show up better for their men, how they need to be more sexually available, and they need to foster a good sexual relationship. And she's talking about the negative aspects of porn. Like, awesome. Like, go check her out. Like, I would be supportive of those platforms, but I can't, because you're not seeing the other side. And so when you see, you could say, the code in the matrix here, right? Whatever, want to use that analogy, but when you can see the truth for what it is, this is really just shaming stuff against men. That's what it is. Something that is negative for men, which is pornography, is being used as a tool to shame and control male sexual behavior, and that's just what it is. All right, so let me break down some facts here. I was going to make this more research driven, and it just got into my rants, but that's fine. What do we got here in the things? All right. Hopefully you guys see my StreamYard's doing weird things, so hopefully you guys can see my screen okay. If for some reason my screen looks weird, just let me know. But it looks weird on my end anyway. All right, let's fucking go, bro. Okay. T Diamond says pornography has been a part of the human experience since the beginning of time. Drawing titties on cave walls. Hell yeah. Yes, it has been. All right. I'm single and I like to watch once a month. Okay. Well, we'll talk about that. Evangelical church women who are close to 30s and overs. Lots aren't dateable. Lots of Lila Roses out there. Okay. Yeah, this is a great one here. So Donald J. DeMarco, good to see you, man, says she's not wrong, but if you replace porn with social media, their critique lines up quite closely. Exactly. Social media is porn for women. Okay, so the damage that social media causes to women, and it's once again, why is there not a post about, hey, ladies, if you're mindlessly scrolling on TikTok instead of having more useful hobbies and taking care of your husband and your children, then you're probably damaging your brain. Where's the brain damage talk about women scrolling mindlessly on reels and TikToks instead of paying attention to their families? Where's that? We're going to talk about good Christian wives, right? Where is that? Being glued to the social media presentation and the act and the psyop or whatever, trying to present yourself as cool instead of actually living your life. Where's that critique, right? You don't see that. And this is my problem. It's a bunch of women telling men what to do. And they might not be wrong all the time, but why don't you fucking tell yourself what to do? You know what I mean? Sit down, shut the fuck up, and tell yourself what you need to do first. And then go tell your friends with vaginas, what they need to do. And then if you're doing that effectively and at scale on a platform, then maybe you want to offer some advice to men. I'm cool with that. But don't sit here and tell men what to do and be intolerable just because simps will let you do it. I'm not going to put up with that shit. You know what I mean? Most guys who with value aren't going to put up with that shit. And so that's the issue that I have, right? Yeah, so anyway, I looked that up. I don't know if saying corn is going to help me on this. As long as I'm not advocating and getting detailed on pornography use. I say pornography, the full name. That should help algorithmically. I don't know. I AI searched on the censorship of that. It's not very clear. Um, this is gonna start having sex more, but not with other people. Yeah, I would agree. You should probably, if you're married, you should be having sex, or in a relationship, in a monogamous commitment, you should be having sex with that person, not other people. All right. Um, would you say that the porn argument applies to the use of prostitutes as well? You're gonna have to clarify what you mean by this one. Does the porn argument addiction apply to use of prostitutes? I mean, using it does, and I mean, I don't know. So you got to clarify what you mean here, because um, I mean, using prostitutes rather than learning to foster genuine desire in a woman who wants to have sex with you because she wants to have sex with you, not because you're paying her. I think it's very damaging in different ways than porn. And I think that there's a lot of social ramifications and risks. Like it's a lot a lot less riskier to withdraw, you know what I mean, with into your computer or whatever and watch porn that way versus going out and calling and seeking out an actual prostitute. There's a lot more inherent risk in that. Um, and so I would have to argue the prostitute thing's probably worse. I don't know. They're not good, and guys, I mean, I'm saying, well, guys are retreating to I mean, are you saying like a married guy retreating to a prostitute because his wife won't bang him? Uh, I would have to say that that's probably more damaging in a way because you're just opening up a lot more risk, you know what I mean, into your life and some of those things. Because a lot of these prostitute situations can go very badly, right? There's potentiality for disease, extortion, getting robbed, ripped off. I mean, there's all kinds of potential problems there. And so anyway, I mean, I'm not sure what you fully mean by that, equating the two. So we got some little conversation there. I'm not going to read all that here. Um, so this is interesting. If your wife is being bitchy and starting arguments every day, what is the male accountability? What is the man accountable for in his wife's behavior? The husband seems dismissive and unhelpful. Well, we don't know that though. So, was he dismissive and unhelpful the entire time, or like what you're dealing with men and women is a lack of tools and skills for communication and coping. All right, so in this scenario I illustrated, yeah, no, the guy is accountable for trying to communicate with the wife, but if she's starting drama and problems all the time, there's accountability on her end, obviously, to not do that. So it does go, there is a degree of accountability on both sides there. But maybe he's tried everything or thinks he has, and maybe she's just being intolerable because that's how she's conditioned herself to behave, and so his coping mechanism is to just not come home right away. I mean, maybe that's the strategy. I'm not saying it's the best strategy or a good one, but that's what it is. Does he have some degree of accountability? Yeah, sure he does. You know what I mean? He does. And this is why, like I said, if I was coaching the guy, I would advise him not to do that. Like if a guy is like, hey, I'm not having a very good sexual relationship with my wife and I'm watching porn all the time, right? We're going to address the whole problem. And if I'm coaching the guy, I'm going to help the guy with the parts he is accountable for. I'm going to train him how to seduce his wife. I'm going to train him how to communicate better with the wife in order to open up these, not just discussions, but just behaviors. Do you know what I mean? We're going to diagnose the problem. Where did the sex drop off? Has it always been bad? Now you're just getting upset about it. Like, what's been going on there? So we diagnose it. We start coming up with solutions, which involves the man doing things to try to change the circumstance. And the reason why is because if I'm coaching the guy, I can influence that guy's behavior. I can't directly influence his wife's behavior. She's not in session with me. I can't tell her what to do to get better results. So I have to do it through the guy, which means it's all going to be focused on his behavior. So in coaching, that's just how that works. But generally speaking, there's some level of accountability for what to do right or optimally on both sides, but you can't, behaviors don't exist in a vacuum. So you can't you can't blame the guys, let's say, for having a less than optimal coping behavior if the woman is causing him to have to come up with a coping behavior in the first place. You see what I mean? So just because the guy's coping behavior may not be the best one, that doesn't mean that she is absolved of all guilt and accountability. Because if she's doing things to create a situation where he has to cope to begin with, she has to evaluate that. Now, maybe he did something to create the situation for her to act that way, which then causes him to act the way he's acting to cope. You see, where does it start? Who knows? Okay. But each person has to look at what parts am I responsible for here? And what parts am I not responsible for? You know what I mean? And then work with that. And that's a starting point. You should go in every scenario, not looking to find faults in the other person as your first go-to. You should go into the scenario thinking, where am I fucking up? Okay. And then you sort of sort out where you're making a mistake first. And then from there, what can I do to change it? Because you control yourself. You can't control everybody else. And then from there, you're sort of figuring out, well, what things do I need her to do? Or if you're a girl, what do I need him to do? How can I communicate that to that person? What can I do to influence the other person's behavior so that it makes it easier or better for them to do the kinds of behaviors that I need them to do so we can be successful. You see, so hopefully that makes sense, but none of these things exist in a vacuum on either side, guy or girl side. You know what I mean? And that's the point here. Thank you for the $5. I appreciate that. I agree that women should be more accountable. And what is the line between that and blame shifting? Maybe I don't want to give a BJ because he's unappealing. Yeah. So, if he's unappealing, why are you with the guy? Why are you with the guy that you don't want to give a BJ to? You know what I mean? Think about that for a minute. Like, why are you with a guy who you don't want to please sexually? So that's where, you really need to evaluate yourself there. Don't settle with a guy that you're not attracted to, that you don't want to please sexually. Like, I don't know, when I'm with somebody, I am very motivated to make her happy sexually. Like, I'm very motivated to please my girlfriend, and to make her happy sexually, to blow her mind, right? We'll say, okay, that's something I'm very motivated to do. Why would, you or any woman not feel that same motivation? Why would any guy not feel that same motivation? Why would you be with somebody who you don't feel that motivation for? Like, that's the big thing, so you have to ask yourself that. And is it because they were attractive before, but then they lost attraction over time because of things that they have been doing? Like, are they not taking care of themselves? That sort of thing. Well, then these are discussions that you need to have, is it maybe the reason, like, you're in a relationship and the reason the sex isn't going well, you're not having sex. Maybe it's something as simple as, the timing's off with work shifts, or maybe the room gets messy. Let's just say that, like, maybe your bedroom gets messy and it's just uncomfortable to fuck in that room. Right. And so maybe then you decide, don't tell your husband or your boyfriend to do it. You'd clean up the bedroom and you put candles out, you make it really nice. And then you have open yourself up to having a good sexual experience in that newly clean bedroom. And then from there, you communicate, have conversations. I really want to be intimate with you more, but we got to keep this bedroom clean, because if the bedroom gets messy and your clothes are on the floor and your dirty socks are over here, it makes me not want to be sexual. So like I cleaned it because of, this time, but we both need to do our parts, to keep this thing clean. I'm asking for your help in doing that. So instead of telling the guy what to do, maybe say it like that. You see, so this is how somebody with accountable behavior does things. And for the guy, by the way, this isn't even gendered, because I would say the guy could do this too. You know what I mean? If you figure out like, well, I think the reason we've lost some intimacy is because of this thing, a messy bedroom, for example, right? Then don't tell the other person, well, the bedroom's always messy and that's why I don't want to have sex with you, as if you're the boss and then they need to dance around and comply with your wishes in order for sex to happen. You see, a guy could do this too, but generally speaking, it's women who do this kind of thing. And that's exactly the wrong thing to do, because that is using sex as a means to control somebody. Well, because then that turns into, if you helped me around the house more, or if you came home at a decent time, instead of hanging out with your friends on Thursday, we could have sex on Thursday. Or if you took me out more, if you bought me more things, you get what I mean? Like all of a sudden it's too easy to go, what are my list of demands that I can just puke out to this guy and then withhold sex until he meets my demands? And that puts the sex into a transactional framework. And a transactional framework for a relationship is the surefire way to lose your relationship, to dissatisfaction or a breakup eventually, right? That's not how to do it. If you want a relationship built on desire, you can't use sex as a tool for negotiation. So like that would be the response for a woman and for a guy in a different way, maybe depending. But if the woman's like, okay, I haven't been in the mood for sex. I think I'm not in the mood for sex because just the bed, we get tired, we get run down and the bedroom's trashed. And then I don't want to have to, be in this. It doesn't put me in the mood to be in this room really and have sex this way. Okay. Instead of throwing out your demands to the other person as if you have no responsibility in this situation, take the initiative and clean that bedroom. And if it was the guy, by the way, if the guy's like, I think our room everything gets so messy. All right, take the initiative as the guy, then clean the room, make it nice, make it romantic, put some scented candles out. You know what I mean? Throw rose petals on the bed and a brand new lube that you just bought, whatever. Okay. If you're sizable, you need lube. Those of you guys who know. So anyways, you throw that out. Okay, you're like, hey, sex is going to happen in this nice room here, right? And then if she turns you down, I got other things for you to do as a guy. We talk about that in coaching. All right, if she's unresponsive to those types of efforts, well, there's other things. But try to solve the problem first and take the initiative on your own to solve it. And then communicate with what that is. Don't just order the person around, tell them what to do, unless you're in a position of authority or power. You know what I mean? If you're in a more of a dominant sub relationship and you have that power dynamic worked out, maybe sometimes the guy is like, hey, maybe the guy's going to say, I need you to clean the bedroom before I get home or something like that. And that's an acceptable, dynamic in that relationship. But if both people are working, most people don't have that dominance submissive setup power dynamic, which is actually a mistake. A lot of people should have that set up, but maybe instead of telling her what to do, or you as a woman telling him what to do, maybe just take the initiative first, solve the problem, do the thing, right? And then say, I want to do more of this. How can you help me so we can have this more often? Right? That's a better way, isn't it? That would be a demonstration, like, and I'm not saying like I said, the guy could clean the room too, but the guy's going to be more dominant. The guy's going to say, hey, look, I cleaned the room out. Okay. And we're going to keep it like this. I'm going to do my part. You're going to do your part because I want to have sex with you more often. And I think that in a gross room, it's hard for us to do that. You know what I mean? That's how a guy might handle it. A woman might say, hey, I really would like, I'm happy we were intimate last night. What can we do so we can do that more often? Because if the room is in a good condition, that's why I cleaned it. If the room is like this, then we're going to do that more often. But I need your help. So what do you suggest that we do? If a woman were to approach it like that, instead of telling a man what to do and issuing her demands, because 50-50 or whatever the fuck, you see, things would go much better. Things would go much better. You'd have more sex. You'd have a damn clean bedroom and you'd get your shit done. But hey, what do I know? I've only done this a lot. You know what I mean? I know you know what I'm doing, but I know that I know what I'm doing. But so many people out there, like, they just can't think like this. They don't think like this because their social conditioning is so bad. Most women wouldn't do that as a response. Most women wouldn't even think of that. You might not have even thought of that, which is why you're here. So hopefully now you go like, hey, that's a pretty good idea. You see what I mean? So you figure out how to solve the problem, Don DeMarco. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for the $10. Thanks for the participation. You're awesome. All right. Let's blow through some of the data now. So we'll start from her tweet. I'm going to pick things from it. All right. Let's look at this little piece. She says, pornography rewires the brain, triggering the same reward pathways as seen in drug addiction. All right. So what the research shows is there is evidence that links heavy pornography use and is associated with changes in the brain activity in reward and impulse control regions. Okay. I should put this data in the, I should post this data when I'm done with the video. All right. So I think I'll do that. But in 2015 review, Neuroscience of Internet Pornography Addiction, a review, found parallels between compulsive pornography use and addictive behavior, including reward circuitry involvement. So yeah, it's true. Porn can be addictive. So that's a true thing. That said, let's look at that though. Let's say, because Pearl is using this example, so don't think I'm projecting it from myself here as a military person, but she was using the example. What about soldiers who deploy overseas? They have no access to sex or women. They use a little pornography, right, in order to release their stress. And then they go back home and have normal, healthy relationships. Like, what about those people? Are we supposed to tell them that not to use porn? It's harmful, all this stuff. And so she makes a good point. And this is a point I'm going to make. There's a distinction between somebody who watches porn occasionally to get off and somebody who's addicted to porn. There's a distinction there. Porn is not heroin or crack. So I think that's where people get it wrong. The people who critique it, they're getting it wrong because it's not. I mean, although someone who's already addicted to porn may show some of the same brain and neurological signals as someone who would be addicted to something like heroin, it doesn't start there. In other words, so heroin or crack makes you addicted immediately. Like you do, if you shoot up heroin, you're addicted to heroin effectively the moment you do that. To what degree will depend on how often you continue to propagate that addiction. But something like heroin, for example, is very hard to get off of. I mean, it's a very, very low number of people. It's only like 10% of people that fully get off something like heroin and stay off of it and don't relapse. I mean, the relapse rate is incredibly high for something like heroin, and it's almost immediately. It's a very, very dangerous drug. A lot of these people on the internet talk about pornography like it's that. It's not that. It's not that at all. All right. It's not like you're going to see porn, and all of a sudden your brain's going to just rewire right there. And now you just can't stop whacking off everywhere. It's not really how it works. And so when it's almost, it reminds me of like those old PSAs they used to do you can see the black and whites in the 50s and 60s that were, marijuana's bad, and it shows people going crazy and jumping out of windows and stuff. Like, nobody took those PSAs seriously. Anybody who experimented with marijuana, even back then, was like, you're not going to jump out a window or try to kill somebody because of marijuana. Like, this is crazy. No one takes it seriously. That's what's happened with the porn discussion. All right. We know that there's an addictive element to porn. We know it can lead to bad outcomes, but then they're talking about it in these binary extremes as if pornography is heroin. It's not heroin. Pornography is more like alcohol. All right. Some people can casually drink alcohol, and I would argue that no alcohol is really good for you. Okay. I'm going to make that argument right now. You can go watch Andrew Huberman. He does good stuff on alcohol, right? It really isn't a good outcome from alcohol. All right. And I'm not judging it. I don't drink alcohol, but I do smoke cigars. Is really a good outcome. I can argue that the nicotine is good and neuroprotective and good for the brain in my cigars, for example. But the delivery method for that nicotine through a cigar is unhealthy. There's no getting around that. All I can do is, not smoke cigars very often, which I don't smoke cigars very often. It might amount to, a couple times a week now, maybe once a week. And so that's not too bad. I'm not smoking every day or something like that. Right. It's a little thing that I do that's bad for me that I enjoy. All right. That's what it is. So that's what cigars are. Alcohol. Some people enjoy alcohol. It's a little thing they do that's bad for them that they enjoy. It's not heroin. Okay. Some people can do a little bit of alcohol and it doesn't affect them very much. Just like there's a lot of people who can do a little bit of pornography. It's not really that effective on them. All right. That's the reality. And I'm not advocating for porn use, but I'm saying let's bring ourselves down to reality. There's this other cohort of people, though, who, when they get involved in pornography, especially when they're using that as a substitute for real relationships and connections with people, they go down a rabbit hole of addiction. They're the alcoholics, so to speak, when it comes to that. If you were to do a brain scan on somebody with severe alcoholism, those corrupted neurological pathways are going to look the same as somebody heavily addicted to heroin. Okay, so the reward system gets affected the same way when somebody has a heavy addiction. So you can throw pornography in there too, but that doesn't start that way. And most people, it never gets there. Now, today, though, in 2025, an increasingly higher number of young people have gotten there. And that's because they're starting pornography use so young. That's the real danger. Okay. And I'll get to that point with different stuff. All right. So, but the research does show it, but we have to add the nuance, or you end up with binary extreme thinking and it ends up being stupid. You know what I mean? So, the nuance needs to add is, okay, so rewiring their brain. That sounds definitive, broad, and permanent. It really isn't. Your brain is neuroplasticity. Okay. Just so you can wire it in a bad way with porn, you can also undo some of that. Okay. But that research of that rewiring is associated correlationally with high use in compulsory groups. So somebody who watches porn now and again to jerk off, for example, like the example Pearl uses of the guys going overseas. Most of those guys who are deployed have to work and show up for mission, whatever it is. Okay. Whether they're combat or non-combat. They got missions they got to show up to every day. They got duties every day. They can't sit there for 5 hours a day jerking off to porn. They don't fit. Most of those people will not fit in the compulsory group. And again, I'm not saying porn is healthy, but we need to sort of temper what we're doing here. I would say alcohol is not healthy, and I make the case to not have it in your life, and it is a benefit to not drink. I really think that. But I'm not going to shame people who have, who enjoy a cocktail once in a while. You know what I mean? Because we have to look at this reasonably. right? And so that's the thing. If you're not looking at it reasonably, as most of the anti-porn people are their approach they're taking, they can't be taken seriously. You know what I mean? They're not being taken seriously. And that's the problem, is that, you won't make an impact because you're not being honest. If you lack integrity, even for good reason, like, it's good to not consume porn. There's a number, just like it's good to not consume alcohol, it's good to not consume porn. But at the same time, like, if you're not taking an approach that's based in integrity, you're not going to impact people. You know what I mean? It's just going to be part of a binary retarded argument on the internet, which is what it's turned into. Okay. Um, and another thing too, causality isn't really clear either. So, like, in other words, is heavy porn use caught, did it really change someone's brain, or did that person have other pre-existing difficulties, like social problems that are existing at a brain neurological level, an inability to connect with others, like autism spectrum, different things that cause them to be hyper obsessed with porn, right? So that's what we don't know. The causality is very unclear. What other mental health conditions are causing, we could say, extreme compulsory porn use, right? And so that's what we need to consider. Okay. Now let's look at this argument. Pornography lowers sexual and relationship satisfaction, leaving couples less connected and more isolated. That's what she said. Okay. Well, the problem with that is the research does show an association between people who use porn and less sexual satisfaction in their relationships. Okay. But it's not showing causality. So what do I mean by that? These things are correlative. So I would argue, if a couple stops having healthy sex, then that's going to lead to problems in the relationship, right? So if a couple stops having healthy sex and then the guy is watching porn in order to get his sexual needs met, and she's withholding sex and either become asexual or seeking out maybe she's seeking out vibrators, right? And other things for her sexual satisfaction. Well, what's the problem, right? The problem the porn? Maybe the problem is her vibrator use. Maybe women are addicted to vibrators and shower head masturbation stuff, right? Maybe that's what maybe we need to ban those high pressure handle shower heads, and we need to ban anything that vibrates, because women are destroying their relationships by retreating to self pleasuring methods rather than being with the guys that they're with. I don't really believe that, but that's the equivalent argument here in a way. You know what I'm saying? You have two people who aren't having a sexual relationship in a healthy way, and they're retreating to other things to solve that problem. The things they're retreating to are not the cause of the problem. And so that's my problem with this claim. Oh, porn leads to sexual. No, it doesn't lead to it. Porn is a symptom of a problem in the relationship, and a sexual problem in the relationship. And what's that cause? Do you think it's because the guy isn't having sex? There are cases where that's true. So there are cases where the guy is deciding not to have sex and then he's retreating to porn. But much of the time it's the woman who is withholding sex or not interested in pleasing her partner or taking care of her husband's sexual needs. That's usually what it is the woman not being interested in taking care of his sexual needs, and even worse, using his sexual needs as a means to get him to do stuff for her, as a means to have power over him. See, there's this power dynamic in these relationships, and it goes down to instinct and mammalian brain drives. Okay. And people are executing strategies to fulfill these innate needs that they're not even consciously aware of. one of those innate things that a woman has is to be able to control the mating relationships with the guys she's with. So women have an innate need to execute this control. Now, since we're dealing with trad cons and traditional conservative women, the Bible explicitly says not to fall to that innate need and to instead be a Proverbs 31 wife. Okay. And instead be subservient and submissive to a husband. That's what the Bible says. It would be nice if these traditional conservatives would go read their Bibles, but they don't, because they only read it when it's convenient. All right, apparently. All right. And so that's part of my issue. You know what I mean? It's this stuff against men. It's all about control. And so, when women are trying to control the sex, and how many of you guys, and I'm going to deviate here to take a left turn at Albuquerque. Okay. Well, an old saying I borrowed from an old friend. Tim, we're going to take a left turn. We're going to take a left turn at Albuquerque. It's the old Bugs Bunny saying. Anyway, okay. Like, how many of you guys, do you know what it's like to control sex in the relationship? Meaning you are in charge of the sex. As a man, you decide when sex happens. How many of you guys know what that's like? Most of you don't, and that's okay. But most of you have not had the experience where you're in charge of sex, where you control the sex. You say when and how and what's going on. She gets a safe word, and she's not allowed to say no. She's allowed to use a safe word, and she's allowed to plead her case. If she's, and it's up to, but not that she has to plead her case necessarily. You're usually empathetic and noticing what's going on with her. If she's not feeling well, if she's got cramps from, that time of the month, or she's exhausted, or some of these things, you as a man are going to say to yourself, now is not the best time. I'm going to have a little bit of sexual discipline, and maybe I'll have sex with her in the morning after she's had a good night's sleep. Or maybe I'll do it in a couple of days when she's not feeling under the weather, right? Like you might execute that as the man, right? But she's not saying no. She's not allowed to. That's the rules in the relationship. She can only say, hey, I'm not feeling well, or something like that, to plead the case, in which case it becomes a discussion or a decision that you make, not just her controlling the sex, right? She's responsible for pleasing you, making you happy. She's an understanding of that in the relationship. And she's just not in charge of it. You are. How many of you know what it's like to have that relationship? If you haven't, I suggest you make that a standard for your relationships. It changes everything up quite a bit, but most men don't know how to do it, and maybe don't have the courage to do it. You know what I mean? Most men will say, oh, I've had that before once, 3 years ago or 5 years ago with this girl I was dating, which tells me that you're only doing it at the whim of the girl. In other words, you're not setting the frame. So I'm not trying to confront you guys and make you guys feel uncomfortable. That's a difficult wall to breach, because women are socially conditioned to control the sex at all cost, otherwise at penalty of death. And anything else besides that is considered like, people will treat you like you're somebody who sexually assaults other people or something. You know what I mean? Like you're some sort of abusive person, because if she's not in control of it, you must be abusive, and that's how we know. That's how we know that we're in a female-centered narrative, right? But try it. Try it, right? Try it where you control the sex. It'll change your life and change hers. She will have a much better time, guaranteed, when she has off the table, and you also, both of you, have off the table the use of sex as a tool to have power over the other person. When you take that off the table, your whole relationship changes. When sex is seen as something you give to the other person, and as something that is used to bond and maintain that bond between you and the person you're with, when both men and women see it that way, and that's how they execute their relationships, everything changes. Everything changes. Okay. But most relationships don't have that power dynamic, and that's why they fail. This is a demonstration. So to sit here and say, going back to porn, that, well, porn lowers relationship satisfaction. We need to see the study where they look at the sexual behavior in the relationship. Because I bet you what you're going to see is that porn use is directly correlated. Well, we do see the porn, because that data is there. The porn use is directly correlated to the lack of sex in the relationship. But I bet you if we were to do some integrity, some research that has integrity, and dig in a little further, you're going to find out that it's not that these guys are just used, in the large majority of cases, these guys aren't just running off to porn and destroying their relationships. The woman stops having frequent or enthusiastic sex with them. That's what happens. The sex gets cut off and the guy goes to porn. That's where it's at. And until women are willing to talk about that part, they can shut the fuck up about the porn use. Leave that up to guys like me. I will tell these guys, don't use porn. It's bad for you. But then I'm also going to direct you into a direction of controlling your sexual outcomes. And if that woman that you're with is unwilling to participate, she gets kicked out of the fucking house, right? It's over. You find there's plenty of great women out there that will be happy to participate in a good, healthy sexual relationship with you. And so if your wife or long-term girlfriend isn't interested, you get to take control of that. Isn't that great? See, women don't like that when I say that. They don't, the women that are out there railing against porn under the Christian conservative banner, most of them want to just say that the guy's a dick for watching porn and that he needs to abstain from porn. And they don't want to have any discussion about what the guy needs to do to take his own sexuality back, to take his power back, and to have sexual power in the relationship where it belongs. Right? So they don't want to talk about that. They don't want the guy to have sexual power. They want the guy to be a submissive, subservient little weenie that only gets sex dripped on him when he's towing the line and doing the things his wife wants. And guess what? Fuck that shit. We're not doing that. All right. And then you see that, you tell them all to fuck off. Right. So that's the thing. That's my problem. It's not that I disagree with her about porn use. She's right about it, but let's talk about that other part. Okay. Let's talk about what's behind the data. All right. Let's look at another thing she said. A national study of 2,120 married U.S. adults documented on PubMed found that when a spouse begins using porn, the likelihood of divorce doubles. So here's what the research shows. There is a longitudinal study said, "Tell Porn, Do Us Part. Longitudinal Effects of Pornography Use on Divorce" by Perry and Schiffler. And they found, so that's the study. They found that among married Americans who begin pornography use between waves, the probability of divorce doubles compared to those who did not begin that use. Well, this supports my point. So what they're saying is there's not really pornography use. And then during the marriage, porn use begins. And then the porn use begins, that correlates with double the chances of getting divorced. Well, that's exactly what I just said, right? So in other words, happy couple having sex together don't need porn. As a relationship goes along, sex becomes less of a priority. Usually the woman decides to stop having sex with her husband. The guy is unequipped to handle it, doesn't have the tools or skills to maintain the standards of a high sex drive relationship and how to seduce her differently now that you're a few years into the relationship, how to handle that. Like, they're just, the couple themselves, the guy and the girl, they're not equipped to maintain a healthy sexual relationship long-term. No one taught them, right? And so because of that, sex drops off. Usually the woman is using it to have power in the relationship. And I'm not trying to make women look bad by saying that. That's what they're taught. They don't know anything else until someone teaches them, right? And the bad part is most aren't willing to learn, though. That's the problem. So that happens, then what happens? Porn use happens. Again, she's using her fucking, pull start, gas powered, vibrating tools on her vagina. He's using porn. Okay, that's what happens. Everyone retreats in their corner and they start taking care of it on their own. Okay. And so then what happens? Double the divorce rate, probably even higher dissatisfaction rates. This is what I've been saying for a long time. If you go back to my video showing the low success rate for marriage, right? This is the crux of why it's there. This is the origins of that. It is the breaking apart of the sexual relationship. The cause is not the pornography. The cause is the relationship and the sexual relationship itself breaking up. And again, we're not doing a deep dive into what women are doing with their vaginas and all the tools and tricks and things they're using on their clitorises, right, to get their needs met outside of their husband, and then saying that's destroying the relationship. No one's doing that. No one's doing that research paper, because I'm sure that would never get published, right? But pornography use. And again, I'm not advocating for pornography use, but we're missing the point here. We got to look at the origins of the problem. The origin of the problem is lack of sex. Okay. So that nuance isn't included in the little tweet. It's my problem with it. She's not wrong, but we got to look at what's behind that. You know what I mean? And so here's an interesting claim. Porn fuels exploitation, trafficking, coercion, and more than 88% of mainstream porn scenes include physical aggression towards women. Okay, so first of all, the research shows that women who watch porn prefer to see physical aggression towards women over men. So it's statistically higher that women are the ones who are wanting to see the aggressive porn again on women. Women like to be banged, okay, in a dominant way, and to be, taking control of in that way. And that leads to what could be labeled by researchers as physically aggressive. Understand, a lot of people have physically aggressive sex that the women enjoy because it's consensual. So physically aggressive sex and physically aggressive towards women isn't necessarily a bad thing if it's consensual and that's what the woman wants. Most of the time, that's what they want. So most of the search histories of women watching porn involve physically aggressive porn. Because understand what a researcher will say is physically aggressive. You know what I mean? Is one thing. That doesn't mean that it's bad or non-consensual or someone's being abused, see? So we got to look at the nuances because it sounds like, it's all this abuse happening on women. Well, here's the deal. Most women who enter porn do so voluntarily. These women who are having sex for money, having sex on screen, opening up OnlyFans, they wouldn't know what to do with themselves if they couldn't sell their vaginas online. That's a reality. These women want and need the rights to sell their vaginas to simps so that they can make money. They want that opportunity to make money that way. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's the reality. So you can't act like these women are victims when they're profiting off of it. Women profit off of the porn industry tenfold, all right, compared to men. Women drive the porn industry, and it's not men kidnapping all these women and then forcing them into pornography. These guys who produce porn, they don't have to do anything like remotely close to that. They just have auditions. Women fuck on the auditions in order to have more for free, usually, to have more opportunities to fuck on camera for money. That's that cohort of woman who does pornography, that's what she does. Most of them. Okay. So, like, let's not confuse that with being trafficked. I take exception to this because I really have a hard time with trafficking, sex trafficking. It makes my blood boil. When a girl is kidnapped and moved from town to town, forced drug use, forced to be addicted to drugs, beaten, abused, assaulted sexually, and brainwashed into a trafficking scenario and used until she's basically dead, right? That's what's going on. That's trafficking. We have a problem with trafficking of minors in this country. We have a problem with trafficking of adult women in this country and keeping women as slaves. And in this sense, right? And many women get victimized by that. That is a real thing. And it makes my blood boil. It makes me want to put all of my military experience to good use. If I knew that there was a trafficking thing happening like around the corner, I would get my CONUS kill. I would. I would call a couple of my friends out. I would love to do an operation to put out some of these abusive people who actually traffic. So to confuse those people with women who are voluntarily entering into the porn industry and doing things with their bodies for money and who are profiting from it and in control of it, it's a very female dominated industry in that sense. You can ask, I mean, this would be one to have Sterling on. Sterling, Cooper, excellent men's coach, excellent. Sterling Cooper's a great guy. He used to do porn, right? He used to be a porn award-winning porn star, if you will, right? He'll tell you about the industry. These women are in charge. They're in control. Any situation where a guy puts a girl in an uncomfortable scenario or something like that usually gets blacklisted from the industry. Okay, so like to present the industry as if these women are all these victims who are all being trafficked is very naive, for one, and once again is indicative of no accountability for women. Once again, it's all the men who are the creepy consumers of porn, forcing women to have sex for money. Bullshit. Look at how many of these girls have OnlyFans, show their asses on Instagram, do outright pornography with production companies, make more money than a guy could make. Most of these guys, showing up to work every day, right? Whatever they do, pouring concrete for a living, whatever, make a fraction of the money of these girls selling their vaginas. And these girls know it, and they would never trade that for the world. These girls would not go pour concrete for a living for pennies on the dollar, knowing that they could just, sell their vagina online and make the same amount of money in a few hours that guy makes in a week. They would not trade those things. Now, there's a lot of women not making money in the industry too, but they're trying and they're doing it voluntarily. So this whole thing about women aren't responsible for themselves and, porn is bad because it's all these women being trafficked, that's bullshit. Okay. The reality is, though, there are women being exploited, trafficked, and coerced. That's a smaller subcategory that needs to be treated differently and with violence. Really, if somebody is in that environment, having that happen to them, we need to go after that and fight against that with a high level of violence. But all pornography does not fall in that category. And it's insulting to these women and these victims to say that it is. It's insulting to equate some woman who is kidnapped when she's 14 years old as a kid, forced into prostitution and pornography and sex work, forced into that by, human traffickers, right? To equate that girl with somebody who shows up to an audition and decides to fuck for money and make, $100,000 a month, I'm sorry, that is immoral. So all these Christian conservatives want to equate the two. Think about what you're doing. You want to morally grandstand right there. That's the most immoral thing I've heard of to date. Okay. Is to equate willing participants who profit handsomely off of the sex industry, to equate those with women who are trafficked and abused and coerced and often murdered, right? Or left, if they escape that world, just left into, shambles, left into, broken pieces of a human being. Never, most of these women will never correct themselves. They'll never be okay. They will never be okay from having that happen to them. You're going to equate that with some girl who's showing her butthole on Instagram and who's doing OnlyFans and having sex for money and making some cash off of it, doing it voluntarily. You're going to equate those two things. You're an ass. All right. You need to go to church then. You need to go to church and apologize. In fact, all you ladies who are out there equating those two, and men too, right? All you traditional conservatives who've equated the two, right? You need to go on your little platforms and apologize right now to all of the victims out there who you have discredited and disregarded by equating them with the vast majority of women who voluntarily profit from pornography. You need to go do that. You need to go apologize right now. I'm sure it's not going to happen, but that's what y'all need to do. Okay. So that's my feelings on that statistic. All right. It's a little bit, it's way out of context and immoral in the way that they're putting that into context. Now we'll get into my final point here, which is pretty important, which is that, porn use is strongly linked, and this is the real root of the problem with porn, is that it's strongly linked with sexual dysfunction and the rise of, erectile dysfunction in young men. And so the research definitely shows that. It's pretty across the board, right? Now, here's the thing on that, all right? That's the real problem. Isn't so much, let's say, it's problematic when the sex goes away in a marriage and the guy retreats to porn as a cope. It's a problem, but is that guy damaging his brain? The 10 to 20 minutes that he escapes to the bathroom with his whatever he uses, his iPad or whatever, to jerk off to porn, a few times a week or whatever. Is he destroying society? Probably not. Okay. That's not the real problem. The real problem is young people. So porn is freely available on the internet, and parents are not equipped to monitor their kids' internet use. Most parents they're just not. They need to make themselves equipped to do that, but they're not. And so parents are not, and this has been going on for a long time. I would hope it's getting better now as parents of these current generation that's having kids are more technologically savvy. But in the, let's say the 2000s and 2010, from 2000 to 2010, 2010 to 2015, for example, technology was moving so fast. Free porn became available at somewhere around in the early 2000s. Parents were just not even aware of how to solve this problem. You know what I mean? You could put parental blocks on cable and shit, but how to do that with the internet? You know what I mean? There's people today in 2025 who aren't even really sure how to control their kids' internet use. And then what happens if that kid goes to a friend's house or is at school? All these kids have cell phones at school, so now he can get exposed that way. There's all these things, right? When I was a kid back in the olden days, you didn't have internet porn. Okay, so you had to get a Victoria's Secret catalog or something and find some sexy models in some underwear or whatever, and you'd be like, oh, hell yeah. And then that's what you would jerk off to at 11 or 12. You know what I'm saying? That's what you had to do. You might catch somebody's dirty magazine, or you might catch like a VHS video somewhere, and that was your porn use and exposure as a young teen boy, right? Whatever. Went back in my day, okay? You couldn't sit there and scroll through any type of sexual depravity for hours and hours as a kid. Like, you couldn't do that. You know what I mean? Like, that was not something that was just available to you as a teenager, as a young kid. And so pornography use did not affect the brain for us older generations in that way, because when our brains were developing, we couldn't poison it with hours and hours of easy access, sexually depraved material. Nowadays, though, and it's been this way for a while, these young kids as early as 8 years old are getting phones, getting access to technology, learning. An 8-year-old can figure out how to get around shit on the computer and stuff. It's pretty amazing in that sense, how savvy kids are with technology. And they're getting access to pornography. They're getting access to terrible things on the internet. But pornography isn't censored in a lot of places. It's starting to get censored a little bit now. And I'm not necessarily saying it should be or shouldn't be. I think it's more of a parent thing. But parents are not paying attention. They don't even know how to pay attention. So kids are getting access to porn. You have kids, these young men today that are 20, 21, 22, 23. They grew up watching porn since they were 8, 9, 10 years old. Okay. That's why they have erectile dysfunction. It's not the guy who's watching porn because his wife won't fuck him. It's the kid who's watched porn his entire, sexually interested life. Since he was a child and learning how to jerk off, right? He's been watching every kind of porn imaginable. And then now he's an adult. And now he can't have normal sex. That's the reason we have so much incel stuff going on, why there's so many incels out there. Because back in my day, if you wanted contact with a woman, you had to talk to a woman in person and face down rejection. You had to learn how to get in with social circles, how to be friends with people and with other girls in the social circle, so you could potentially try to date those girls. There's a process pre-internet that you went through to try to court and date people. And you learned how to do that. And in high school, in middle school, these kids now don't have that. They're on the screen 24 hours a day. And they're getting those that need, when a boy or girl gets interested in sexual contact, right? Not to say that they should, as kids, they should stave off till they're adults, but the desire starts happening when they're very young, right? And instead of having person-to-person contact, okay, and mating friends and going to homecoming, whatever, with somebody of the opposite sex, and having a little boyfriend that you know what I mean, you send notes to in between classes, instead of having those things, they're on screens. And then they're getting sexual access through pornography. And that pornography is changing the way that their sexual triggers are, changing the way that they respond to sex. And again, it's causing them to seek out digital novelty instead of real relationships. By the time these young boys grow up and are sexually capable adults, they are not good in bed. They can't have sex with a normal woman. They can't, you know what I mean? They've conditioned themselves to get an easy release off of a screen. So any sort of little bit of anxiety that every man will go through when he's with a new girl, instead of making that exciting for him, a little bit of anxiety shuts his system down, sends danger signals. Now he has erectile dysfunction. So this is an epidemic, right? Low testosterone men, okay, low incel behavior, low quality of sex when guys do have access to women. And all these women are like, where are all the men at? You know what I mean? Well, the men have been sedated and not even men, they've been pacified through porn use and screen time. That's what's gone on. So that is the real danger. The real problem of porn isn't the husband is watching porn because his wife won't bang him. That's not the real problem. You know what? That's a solution that's real easy that none of these women on the internet want to talk about, which is just have sex with each other. Have sex with your husband. Your husband's retreating to porn. Cool. Tell him to watch, tell him to keep watching, and then go ahead and go down on him right there while he's doing it. Why don't you try that? Spice things up a little bit, right? Well, that won't that doesn't enter their brains, because that would mean sexually serving the man that they're with and making him happy, and that would, in their minds, take away their power. So you don't have that conversation. The porn use in marriage problem is an easily solvable problem, and women hold all the cards to solve it. Really, they do, in most cases. Now, again, I'm not sitting here saying the guy doesn't have any responsibility. I think if you're a man, you shouldn't be retreating to porn. You should be working on the problem of sex in your relationship. And if that problem can't be solved, then you solve that problem in a different way, which usually means ending the relationship. Okay, that's my recommendation to the men. But the ladies have the very easiest solution right at their fingertips. They really do. So that to me isn't a problem. The problem is all of these young people getting access to pornography, and that is what's neurologically changing the brain. That's what's causing the addiction, because when you're getting that access that young, your brain is still formulating, it's still growing. And so now the brain grows and formulates around excessive porn use. That's why these young people, like I've watched porn before. I've never even thought about being addicted to porn. That seems crazy to me. I can't remember the last time I watched that stuff. Why? Because I have a girlfriend and we have a sexual relationship. You know what I mean? Like when you're having sex, you kind of like don't need that. It's kind of a weird, to me, that's weird. But I hear all the time men in coaching, men who send me messages, young men in their 20s with this problem all the time, addicted to this pornography. It's like they can't get off it. It's like a compulsion. I'm like, the quickest way to get off of it is start talking to women and start having sex. Right? Like get in a sexual relationship. What are you doing on porn? That's like a big hurdle for these guys to overcome, because they didn't grow up like I did. They didn't grow up with like, okay, if I want contact with a woman, I got to go talk to women. You know what I mean? They grew up retreating to screens with a very realistic stimulus for the brain and with that easy access to pornography. They grew up conditioning their brain to respond sexually to porn, making it more difficult for them to breach the hurdle of facing rejection and talking to women. They don't even know how to be attractive to women. Like you learned how to be attractive to women when you were young back in the 90s and prior to that, because you would get ridiculed if you did unattractive things. I know I did plenty of unattractive things when I was a young man, young child, got ridiculed, stopped doing those things. It was fine, right? It was all good. Okay. They'll let you know if you're awkward or if you're this or you're that, or if your shirt looks stupid or if you smell funny. I didn't really have problems with smells, which is kind of nice. I don't know. Genetically, I think I have a good smell, but I might wear some clothing that gets me made fun of. What do? You just don't wear that clothes that you find something else to wear. You know what I'm saying? Like you try to do something to be cool and then girls and guys ridicule you. Yeah, you figure it out. You know what I mean? And you do that because you don't just have porn you can retreat to. You don't have the internet to retreat to for your social interactions. You like, ooh, I made myself look silly socially. Time to solve that problem now so I don't look like a dork tomorrow, and that was just how it went, and that's how it's gone throughout the entirety of history until the early 2000s when everyone outsourced social interaction to social media and pornography. And young kids have been doing that now for decades. That's the problem. This is the root of the porn addiction. This is the root of these dudes who just are like addicted. I can't stop watching porn, man. Like, and I haven't had a girlfriend in 3 years and I can't stop watching the porn. Like, can't stop jerking off. Maybe I need to join a support group and call it NoFap and lie to myself about testosterone levels or something, right? Just like all these crazy copes now that you have, this is all stemming from kids starting porn use, nobody checking them, right? Nobody like stopping them, and them doing that for years and years and years. And it sucks. And you listening to this, guys, there's guys right now listening to this stream who've done that exact thing. And all I have to say is, like, I know I sound like a broken record, but you need to get around other men who are motivated to do something different than that and start having real relationships, start dating. Okay, this is why you can go to the community and start saying, like, tell your story, be like, hey man, like, I'm looking to get out and talk to some women, start having some dates, get into a healthy relationship. I haven't done it in a while. You can even be honest about your porn use there. That's fine. No one's going to ridicule you in my community for it. We're going to hold you accountable and call you out if you're stupid, but that's for your own good though. Okay. That's not like to make you sad. All right. It's to make you better. And so that's what you need to do if you're that guy, man. All right. Cause that's the real epidemic. The real epidemic is children getting involved with pornography, and it's particularly harmful for the guys. So that's another thing. Like, guys and girls are not the same. You can watch Kindergarten Cop. All right. And that kid in Kindergarten Cop who says boys have peepees and girls have vaginas. He's right. That little kid got it right. Okay. A lot of you guys, a lot of people in 2025, adults, get it wrong. All right. But boys and girls, they're not the same. And that means our brains are wired different. And one of the things we know that, for example, excessive promiscuity is more harmful to a woman and her developing brain and her relationship outcomes than it is for a guy. That doesn't make it okay for a guy, but I'm just saying, if we're going to talk about damage, women being promiscuous, more damaging than men being promiscuous. But we flip that around when we're talking about pornography, okay? Porn use is more damaging to a man's brain, it would seem, okay, than it is for a woman and her outcomes. So, in women, 1/3 of women out there watch porn now. So, it's not like a rare thing. A fair amount of women watch porn, okay, just like the guys. But sorry, guys, that woman growing up watching porn, it's actually less damaging to her sexual outcomes than it is for you. Okay, it just is. It just is because of our brain wiring. And I would take another hour of discussion for me to explain the reasons why. But because of the way our brains are, it's not good for a guy. It's not good for his sexual performance. All right. And so, and for women, it's less of a consequence, just the way it is. But this addiction problem we have with pornography stems from childhood use. That's the real problem. Most adult men who weren't developing an addiction as a child aren't addicted as adults. They may watch it just like a casual drinker might have an occasional beer. You know what I mean? Hell, a casual drinker might have a drink or two every single night and still not be addicted to alcohol in that way. There's a casual porn user due to a circumstance is not the same as somebody who's heavily addicted to pornography. The heavy addiction usually stems from childhood use. That's where the epidemic, that's where the problem lies. Okay. And so those of you who have done this to yourself, some of you guys are younger than me who grew up with porn and you've done this to yourself. We have to unravel and change and recondition the brain. That's one of the things I'm an expert at. So you can get in my community and we can talk about some things you need to do in order to rewire your brain over time so you could have healthy, better sexual relationships and not have this porn addiction. For the rest of you, though, you're probably not addicted. It's probably just a sexual access problem. I still think it's harmful. I don't think you should be watching porn over and above having sex with a real person in the context of a real relationship. So my advice to those who are not addicted is don't really worry about it. Okay. Just focus on getting in real relationships. If you're in a real relationship with a good sex life with that person, you're just not going to watch porn. And if you do, it'll be instructional or something you do with her, right? Or something like that. It won't be damaging. You know what I mean? And so I think that's the direction we need to go. And that third thing is just to recognize this whole shaming on porn thing that these women are doing. It's just another method of control, another method of making men get back in the longhouse, making men more subservient. And it's all full of shit, right? It's all bullshit. And so until these women start talking about what a woman can do to be a better wife and how a woman should be initiating and talking about and making herself more available for sex in her marriage, until these women are willing to talk about that, they can pretty much shut the fuck up about porn use for husbands. That's my opinion on it. They don't have a right to tell these guys anything if they're not policing up their own gender. You know what I mean? That's what I think. But that doesn't excuse porn use either. Okay. So if you're a husband and you're trapped in that cycle, it's miserable, man. It's not good. Let's get you out of that cycle. Let's get you having a healthy sexual relationship with a living, breathing person. That's better than a screen, isn't it? Let's work towards that. All right. Well, thank you again, guys, and thanks for sticking it through. Oh, okay. The screen, man, the StreamYard is doing weird stuff. Well, anyways, thanks again. Again, support the channel, get in the community. Don't forget about that new course that's going to be dropping soon. It's going to make you guys savage and ruthless, but in a good way. So hope to see you in all of those things. Take care.